you see the role of political engagement for people of faith? Why is it important? What are some common pitfalls that might occur? And David, I'm going to begin with you.
Yeah, so I had the unique, or not unique, but unusual experience of coming to faith really late in life, or relatively late, in my 50s, early 50s. And I have to tell you that my coming to faith did not affect my politics particularly. And I'm a political pundit, so I'm in politics a lot. I spend all my days with politicians. And I think that's in part because I had been raised in the Jewish world, or even in the secular world, with the biblical metaphysic, with the certain ideas that I now come to believe are divinely true, but just thought were common sense before, which is that people are made in the image of God, and we should orient our society toward those who are the least among us. And so Jim and I have a shared love of Dorothy Day, and the love of Dorothy Day preceded my belief in Christianity and belief in God. But I knew that when I saw Dorothy Day, someone who lived with the poor, surrendered to the poor, and lived with the poor, I was seeing some piece of moral beauty. And that became part of just the normal center of my life. And I knew that when I was looking at beauty, whether it's artistic or divine, I am looking in a way that is attentive and not egotistical. And I'm trying to see people who are, I'm looking into the face of God when I see a person. And so my politics were really oriented around that even before I came to faith. And it's interesting, Jim and I interpreted that in radically different ways. So for most of my life, I'm conservative, and Jim is anything but. But I interpreted my conservatism as a defense of a moral order that would give dignity to each individual. And I think Jim would say probably the opposite, but that doesn't separate the fact that we both are trying to serve the individual person who was so important that Jesus died for. And we may have different interpretations of how we serve that person, but I'm pretty confident that's the end to which we see politics. And so I see that religion and faith and art and culture as pre-political. And our interpretations of how the goals that we're commanded to live out, that's reason, that's up to us. But the goals are commanded to us. And so to me, the pre-political nature of human life and the orientation of our moral commitments is more important than whether we support this or that bill. And so even though I write about politics, I'm a big believer in the phrase Samuel Johnson used, of all the things that human hearts endure, how few are those that kings can cause and cure. Meaning that what really matters is our treatment of each other, and our political manifestation of that is secondary.
Thanks for watching this Theology Lab video. If you're enjoying it, you can subscribe to the channel below and you'll get more Theology Lab videos as soon as they're released.
There's so much in that we're going to be coming back to in a moment. But Jim, why don't you share some perspective on the role that religion can play in political discourse, the implications of that role, and some of the pitfalls of that?
Well, Dave and I do have a similar love of Dorothy Day, the founder of the Catholic Worker. And I remember when I was in college, in those student movements around racism and poverty and war, I wasn't aware of any Christians who were involved in any of those movements. In fact, they were mostly against the things I was doing. But I remember I could never, even though I'd left the church, or it had left me, I'm not sure which, I could never quite get shed of Jesus. And I kept coming back. And I remember after a lot of organizing, I went back to read the New Testament on my own after years of organizing and all the rest. And I found this text that became my conversion text, the same conversion text as Dorothy Day. It's the 25th chapter of Matthew. It was the most radical thing I'd ever read. At the time, I was reading like a lot of students like me, Ho Chi Minh, Che Guevara, and Karl Marx, and this was more radical than all of them. And I called the "It Was Me" text. Jesus, I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty. I was naked. I was stripped of everything. I was a stranger, meaning immigrant there. I was in prison. I was sick, and you didn't come to me. And we said, Lord, when do we see you hungry and thirsty and naked and sick and in prison? We didn't know it was you. And then he says, well, as you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. I never read anything as radical as that. Here's the Son of God sitting in judgment in that text, this last teaching before going into the city of Jerusalem. And he says, I'll know how much you love me by how you treat them, those who are poorest and most vulnerable. And that's the key, I think, to Christian politics. We can disagree on philosophy and debates, but the Hebrew prophets made clear in the Hebrew scriptures that a nation is judged by how it treats the poorest and most vulnerable. How they're doing is the test of a nation's righteousness, not its military firepower, its GNP, or its popular culture, but how it treats the poorest. That to me is the touchstone of what Christians ought to do in public life, is defend those who are marginal, on the edge. The economics and politics of Jesus turn this world upside down. I'm here at Georgetown, and the politics in Washington are the least of these are the least important. And I'm trying to turn those things upside down, where Jesus says those who are left out and left behind are the ones I want you to pay particular attention to. How they're doing is, to me, the test of Christian politics.